Welcome to Tripping Over the Ottoman. I'm David Van Deusen here with my co-host, Abby.
And join us, two superfans from two different generations, as we take a deep dive into episodes of the one thing that does unite us.
And that is the Dick Van Dyke Show.
And today we're going to be doing a close analysis and just really fun discussion of what I would consider one of the best episodes of the entire series. And if you go on the internet, it usually makes all the top 10 list as well for one of the best episodes of the series. And that is an episode called The Impractical Joke.
And definitely one of my favorite episodes from the show. Great cast, great story, and really finely executed.
Absolutely.
This is a season 4 episode, number 16, written by our favorite guys, Bill Persky and Sam Denoff, in October of 1964. Revised on November 6th, 1964. Ultimately filmed November 10th, 1964. And airing in January of the next year on January 13th. And directed by, again, Jerry Paris.
Who has already done a bunch of episodes at this point, so he's very fluent. I think it really shows in this one. This was one of my very favorite episodes as a kid. I watched it constantly. I've probably seen it literally thousands of times. I could probably say the lines verbatim without even having the episode playing in front of me. And I think why is because it had so many twists. And it had so much reaction from all the characters. It had the phone being like the big crux of the show is Dick Van Dyke being on the phone and that whole thing. And then also I think I like when they show the show business part of their lives bleeding into the personal part of their lives. So when they have a party and they're, doing musical numbers, things like that. And this is just another example of that, of their comedians and doing pranks on people. And then this is how they spend their Saturday night. So I like that. And I just like comedy about comedy too. I think that's really fun.
It was interesting for me. I did a little research on the various synopsis of this episode, and there's varying versions of that. I don't know if you found any.
I found a few. Yeah, let me hear what you have.
One says, after Buddy targets Rob with a prank phone call, he expects a reprisal. But the longer Rob takes to pay him back, the more paranoid Buddy becomes, suspecting everything and everybody.
I like that one. I like that one because they don't ruin the end either. Some of the synopsis, they ruin the end of it. Like, whoa.
A second one said, Rob uses psychological warfare to get revenge on a practical joker. I thought that was an interesting take on it. What do you have?
I had the first one you had about the, suspecting everything and everybody, which I think really plays about, the crux of the episode, which is that we're watching Buddy just devolve into, absolute paranoia. And that's really where the comedy's at.
Yeah, this is a great episode for Maury to really shine, I think.
Definitely.
The last version I had was wary of being taken in by a practical joke. Buddy refuses to heed a visit from an agent of the Internal Revenue Service.
Kind of strange, yeah. So there's some key players in this episode, two in particular who have actually seen both in other episodes of the Dick Van Dyke Show. So you probably, as a viewer, will be aware. But first one is, and how do you say Lenny's last name, David?
Weinrib.
Lenny Weinrib. He, of course, plays Phil Franklin in the episode, who is, Buddy calls him his accountant by day and the top practical joker in the business by night, something like that. He was an actor, comedian, and writer. Fortunately, he passed away, I think, 2006. Is that right, David? Somewhere around there. But he actually, which I didn't know when I looked him up, he was studying to be a doctor at UCLA. And then apparently saw his friend Carol Burnett in some sort of like campus show and got inspired to be an actor, which I think is such a great story, if that's true.
Yeah, Lenny, it was interesting. He was just coming up on 30 years old. He was 29 when he did the Impractical Joke. His earlier episodes, he was first on the show when he was 26 years old.
Wow.
In addition to the Dick Van Dyke Show, of course, he had any large number of other television roles. He was on Peter Gunn. He was on Dennis the Menace, My Favorite Martian, The Munsters, Twilight Zone. Later, he did Magic Mongo. It was a kids like Saturday morning show.
Well, and then most notably, he was, he did a bunch of voiceover work.
Yes.
Apparently hundreds of credits. I saw an article from the LA Times. They said by the mid-1960s, Weinrib was one of the top 10 voiceover talents, supplying voices for Ford, Avis, Pepsodent, Hunt's tomato sauce, etc. So yeah, pretty prolific there.
But I think you're going to mention HR Pufnstuf.
Yes, that's what I was going to, yes.
Yeah, HR Pufnstuf, well known. Pebbles and Bam Bam, Scooby-Doo, Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, Smurfs.
So many.
Interestingly, he did have a intersection with the Dick Van Dyke Show in a way, because Lenny was one of the performers in the Billy Barnes review.
Yes. And is that not what Anne Morgan Gilbert was in?
Ann Gilbert was in that. Joyce Jameson was in that. Jackie Joseph was in that. Ken Barry was in that. So other folks who had common future threads in terms of involvement with the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Absolutely. He's in 3 episodes of the show, and in all of them, he plays some sort of comedian or comic, but in just completely varying roles with different names. So it's kind of the same character. But the first one is season 1 with Buddy, Can You Spare a Job? Who he plays Jackie Brewster, the one that sort of comes in and harasses Mel until he finally says, get me, buddy, kind of thing. And this is an arm, this is a rib, that guy. And then season 2, we have the Sam Pomerantz scandals, which is where they go to I don't know, like a cabin. I can't remember.
A resort in the Catskills, I think, right?
Yeah. And his pal Danny Brewster, which is sort of similar, is there and doing, as a comedian, and then he gets hurt, and Robin and his gang have to kind of put the show together. And then this one, of course, he's playing Phil Franklin, another comedian.
Interesting side note on his involvement here as Phil Franklin is Lenny was not cast to play that role until the day of the filming.
I did not know that.
Yes.
I did not know that.
So Lenny got a call from Carl on that Tuesday morning, letting Lenny know that the guy that was supposed to play the role was going to be unable to play it. And Lenny said, Carl called and said, can you come and do it? Lenny, the quote that I got from Lenny was, I gulped hard and said yes. But he said the cast was wonderful. They rehearsed over and over with me all day long. And at night, they did it in front of the audience.
That is amazing.
He said, what a rush it was to do it that quickly, like one day.
So now, when did you talk to Lenny? When is this happening? So as some of you don't know, David has a very long history with the cast and crew of the show. You can check out a book where he describes all his things, and he's got a great Facebook page, everything. So if you're interested in those sort of like personal one-on-ones, he's got a lot of them. So,
I published the Walnut Times for 20 years and was always in search of those folks involved with the show. I actually had a hard time locating Lenny Weinrib, and part of that was because he had moved to Santiago, Chile. I can't actually remember how I found him there, but
it's amazing that you did.
It was in the late 90s or almost the year 2000. Found him there, and we began to communicate by email, back and forth. Eventually, I asked him about his involvement with the episodes, so I'll sprinkle in some of his thoughts and comments as we go here. But we had a great time emailing each other. There was actually a point in time when instant messaging became technologically viable, and we did some instant messaging in real time.
Funny. Oh, I love that.
Kind of interesting that he was in Chile and I was in the United States, and we were having this real-time type conversation.
Well, that's a real treat for us. So
we'll talk more about some of the things that he shared with me as we pursue our discussion here today.
So a second big key player is a gentleman, Alvy Moore. I believe I'm saying his name correctly. And he is probably known to people by one of 2 ways, or both ways, which is he was the so he's in this episode first. He plays William Handelbuck, the IRS agent. But then just like a few episodes later, he's back again playing the pillow salesman as Mr. Wiley in the case of the pillow, where they have the chicken feathers. And so it's interesting to me that they would bring him back so soon, just 4 or 5 episodes later, like, no one will know this, like, we'll just have him again. That was very interesting. But the second way people might know him is, might know Alvy Moore, is he was a very big character on Green Acres for probably 6 or 7 years. So
Hank Kimball.
Yep, yes. Hank Kimball.
Appeared in 142 Green Acres episodes as Mr. Kimball. But his career was quite long at that point, because he started in the early 1950s.
I remember as a kid seeing the Wild One and going, hey, that's the pillow salesman, because he says like a little motorcycle gang member in there. I don't think he even has any lines. I can't remember, but I remember saying, oh, so yeah, way back.
But he was on other shows, My Little Margie, Mickey Mouse Club, Dragnet, Donna Reed, Pete and Gladys, Perry Mason, Gomer Pyle. But yes, most folks probably know him best as Hank Kimball on the Green Acres.
Yeah. And you'll see this a lot where they bring back a character like that in the show. They do this from time to time, or an actor in the show to play different characters. Well, we're talking about another one right here was Lenny, same thing, and I guess, I don't know if the way they were released, they just thought people wouldn't catch on, or maybe they didn't know we would be analyzing it, 60 years later.
That's mostly it. I mean, who knew it would even have a life in reruns?
Yeah, exactly.
It was like once and done.
Yeah. Now, did you ever speak to Alvy Moore at all?
I did not ever speak to him, but we did communicate by mail, and I have a nice photo of Alvy in my Dick Van Dyke Show archive signed, where he signed it, Mr. Wiley and Mr. Handlebuck.
That's awesome.
He also, you could get the sense that he really enjoyed his involvement with the show as well.
It seems like most people did. I haven't read anything from anyone that said I had a bad time on the show. Sounds like sometimes it was the greatest of their career. So very cool.
In my experience, anybody that I ever spoke to about the show, no one has ever had a bad word to say about their involvement with the Dick Van Dyke Show.
It's so cool.
To contrast, you're absolutely right. Many of them have said it was it's the line on my resume that I'm most proud of.
That's so cool. Okay, so we start with scene 1 of the episode in Sally's apartment. Now, I'm going to note that the apartment seems to be arranged a little bit differently than earlier in the show. There's sort of the earlier ones like Where Have You Been, Fastbinder, those episodes, and the layout is very specific. It has like a back door and there's this sort of step down, and this one's totally different. And then they kind of stick with this one after this. So a few episodes later, it's still the same apartment. It has these sort of post up, and I think there's a window instead of a door, that kind of thing. But it's very cool.
Yeah, I would agree. This is like yet another iteration of what her apartment might look like.
There's some party guests. There's Buddy and Sally, of course. Mel, Frank Adamo, right? He's there.
He is. And Johnny Silver.
Yes.
Character actor Johnny Silver, who's, of course, we've talked about, has appeared in a number of episodes, but he's sort of sitting on the floor with his back to us. But as soon as he talks,
who
we all recognize his voice.
Definitely.
For sure.
And I like that everyone's dressed so beautiful at this party. There's like a Saturday night prank phone call. Everyone's wearing a suit, and Sally's got this big, lovely bow in her hair. And
so
it's so fun.
I think, isn't that notable, right? Mm-hmm. The hair bow is there, but it's enormous in this case.
And worn on the top. Mm-hmm.
Yes, in contrast to what we're usually seeing.
Definitely. And they are making prank phone calls. They have a recording device that they're plugging into the phone, which I'm not sure if that's legal or not. And they are making prank phone calls and recording them.
Sally points out that she thinks wiretapping is illegal, yes. And they all laugh.
Yeah. So and we get a little setup. So we get to hear a prank call that Buddy makes to start. Kind of gets us in the mood for what we might hear later when they finally decide to, call Rob. So Buddy calls a flower shop, and there's sort of like a crazy joke about like a cooking chrysanthemums and the Shar of Zolzine and all these things. And of course, Buddy's brilliant at it, master at it. Sally's, of course, annoyed, just like you're. What did she say? Like, you should have held this party in a phone booth,
Yeah.
It's just, so she's kind of, Buddy says she's pooping her own party, I think, at one point.
Yep. So did you take note of the name of the flower shop that he called?
Mrs. something.
Madam Guy's flower shop.
Interesting. Oh, I did not notice that.
Madam Guy, Rosemary Guy. Yeah. So I think a little tip of the hat to 100%. Rosemary and Bobby Guy, Madam Guy's flower shop. Yeah.
Great catch. They do this joke about the flower shop, and that, goes well. Of course, everyone's laughing. And then Buddy introduces the main character of this show, Phil Franklin, which is, of course, played by Lenny Weinrib. And I think it's very plausible that all of Buddy's acquaintances, like his team of people, like if he had a lawyer and accountant, except they'd all also be fellow comedians. Like, I feel like that makes a lot of sense,
Yeah. I like the little exchange just before he introduces Phil, when Buddy says to the party guests, we have a real treat for everyone. To which Mel says, "Oh, you're going home?" And Buddy shoots back, Mel, I forgot you were here. Now we can play pin the tail on the donkey, right? So again, the repartee between Mel and Buddy continues even in the party setting.
Yeah, it's like they're at the party together. They're still sort of at odds. It's great. So then they decide, because Phil's, and Sally's sort of protesting, I don't want to do this, but they decide to call Rob. This is where it gets good. They are going to make a recording and listen to it later. So they tell everybody, be quiet. We're going to record. The scene then cuts to the first time, and we see cutting to Rob and Laura in their home. In the previous episode of this podcast, when we had Larry on, we were discussing about how amazing Dick Van Dyke is on the phone, as well as a lot of the other characters. You'll see here Buddy and Lenny are also just as good. But it's almost like they wrote an entire script, an episode, based off that idea that we like to see Rob talking on the phone, and which I think is so awesome. So we get the, suspense he's about to call Rob. We are very kind of excited for that, I think.
Interestingly, though, my sense is, and you tell me what you think, but my belief was that this scene exchange was actually going on at the same time. So somehow they were on a separate set and still able to hear each other to have the exchange that they had, because it is so natural. And
I was going to ask if you knew how that was filmed, because I wondered and I wondered just for the audience's sake, could they, if they only heard one side of things, would it make any sense, and the timing be strange? So you're considering that they had two scenes side by side talking to, that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I've seen tapings of shows where that occurred, and both parties are actually talking in different locations but can hear each other.
That's very cool.
Yeah. This phone conversation is quite the ordeal. So I have another little tidbit, though. I don't know if you noticed, but as you talked about, they have the device attached to the phone to do the recording. And Buddy taped the initial call to the flower shop, and they get ready to do Rob's thing. And they said, we'll record it. You viewers should go back and look at the scene very closely. And what you'll find is that if you take your attention away from looking at the actors talking and you look down at the tape recorder, sometimes it's running, sometimes it's stopped.
Interesting.
It looks like they've stopped it, but then they cut back and it's going again. And
somebody forgot to turn it back on again.
Yeah. So it's
cool.
these little things, but
yeah,
it just happened to catch my eye.
Oh, interesting.
Go check it out and see what you think.
That's very cool. Yeah, and anyone in the comments, if you find little bits like that, we love that stuff. So feel free to leave it.
Yeah.
So then we cut to the second scene, which is Rob and Laura in the living room, and they're watching TV, and they're sitting side by side, which I think is cute, and they're on the edge of their seats watching something very dramatic on the TV when the phone rings, and they both want to see the end of the show because it's very dramatic, it's very suspenseful. So Rob kind of answers the phone, but he says, hold on a minute, and then they watch the ending together. And again, it's exciting for us because we know who's on the other end of that phone, and it's going to be so funny. And the way that they sort of extend out the suspense of it by him, immediately not answering is it's just so wonderful, because we know Rob's character so well at this point at season 4. We can anticipate how this entire phone call will go right off the bat, right? He's easy to please. He wants to be a problem solver. He's very intimidated by authority. He's kind of gullible, a little naive. So we get this sense of oh no, we know what's coming, which I think is so great. And
even still, we're tied up watching the end of the television drama. Gunshots are heard. Rob and Laura look at each other and what? Well, all the suspects were killed. Who was it? Rob says, I'm going to call the network and complain.
It was a suspect. It was a victim. Yeah. Should have known. Well, they have all these great little bits of TV stuff too. Do you remember the one where Millie sends all the letters, and Jerry Paris is on the TV talking about how the subway got flooded, and then there's all these little bits of dialogue coming from the TV. Yes. So there's always some good comedy there. Yeah.
So the caller finally Rob says hello, and the caller says, this is Mr. Murdoch. Have I reached the right number? New Rochelle 69970. Now, interestingly, known as NE6 for New Rochelle. That's how the little first 3 digits were back in the day, right, on phone numbers.
That's so cool.
So NE6 9970. This number is the Petrys. It's because we hear it not only in this episode, but in other episodes as well. Being in New Rochelle, the Scarsdale area, the area code would have been 914. So just for fun, I dialed 914.
I love this.
NE6 9970. And even today, it's a non-working number. Now, I don't know how they picked a number that they knew would be a non-working number. But even today in 2024, it says the number is not in service at this time.
Cool. I feel like we need to get a landline hooked up somewhere, and we own that line now, and we play jokes on it or something from the show. We need to use that.
It would have been fun to have the person answer the phone and say, "Do you know that you had Rob and Laura's phone number?" And they might have said,
"Right,
Rob and Laura, who?"
That's so cool.
Oh my gosh!
Now you said Mr. Murdoch, which is also interesting because again, names being used again and again. I don't remember what episode the Ray Murdoch X-ray was, or what season. I want to say season 2, maybe it's season 4. Can't remember. Same. We're using the name again, Mr. Murdoch, and it's just fun. It's just a funny little nod if you're watching the show, oh yeah, I remember that. And now you were talking about the area codes, David. Would it be plausible in 1965 because I wasn't born in it, would it be plausible for somebody to call and say, "Hey, I'm a telephone repairman"? And because and not probable, because for Rob it just has to be plausible. I feel like he'll still kind of agree to it. But would it be even plausible that someone would call like that to say your telephone wasn't working?
I think it was back then.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, I was 5 years old in 1964, 65. And it was a very interesting thing about the phone. Like we talked about NE6, right? My grandmother's number was HE9, right? It was letters back then. So that was classically how it was done. You didn't make many long distance calls because they were very expensive. So I'm not surprised that it's quite possible that something like that could have occurred.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think probably the premise, that's why Persky and Danoff thought it was a reasonable premise to base this on.
Yeah, absolutely. The telephone repairman, or Phil, calls and says that, people have reported that the Petrie's phone is out of order, and he just wanted to check and make sure, everything was okay, kind of thing. Rob says it's fine. Seems fine to me. He goes to hang up, and that's when the prank kind of starts more so, which is Phil starts to tap into the mouthpiece of the phone with a spoon, little by little, and over, and just very gently in the background, just to give the illusion, hey, there's something wrong with the line, maybe,
And it continues intermittently, just enough to think that it's fixed, but then just as they go, hang up, no, it's not fixed again.
Yep.
And the tapping starts, and Franklin says to Rob, well, can you describe for me what it sounds like? And, he sort of listens, tap, 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 right? And he's like, well, you're not going to believe this, but it sort of sounds like the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which is sort of, you could almost sense that's what he was going after.
Totally.
All I can think of is it could have been Jingle Bells, right? But
same thing.
But we got to Battle of the Republic,
which is so much funnier.
Oh my gosh!
So then there's a sound going on, and the best part of these moments is where Lenny is interacting with the guest at the party, like while he's on the phone making the call. So at one point he just says, oh yeah, it's probably an overcrowded trunk line. He's giving these like shrugs to the party, like, I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm just making stuff up, know, and those are the best moments.
One of the lines that was in the script that didn't make it to air was, he says to Rob, it's probably your double E8854. And Rob says, well, what is that? And he said, your dioscillator component. So who came up with these bizarre component names of the phones?
So great.
The first direction that he gives to Rob, maybe to fix the problem, is to hold the receiver in one hand and with the other hand shake the base of the phone vigorously over his head. And Rob says, well, what's that going to do? Well, it'll jar your 2246, your audio filament. This is another fine moment because Laura comes walking in as she sees Rob doing this and sort of looks at him like, what is this crazy man doing, shaking the phone over his head?
And I think I remember reading somewhere in a book about, sort of like how to influence people or something, that there's always a specific moment in any encounter when someone's trying to sort of manipulate someone else, where if they can get the person to do XYZ after that, they'll do anything. And I feel like waving the phone over his head is that point of no return where, well, he's in it now, he's just waving the phone. And it's just like, well, at that point, he's got him to do that. Phil Franklin knows, like, okay, I got him now. He's going to keep going, And you're right. Laura comes in, and, Rob sometimes gets a little flash of suspicion. So he says, my 2246, he's got a little bit of that sounds kind of hokey, but he always just buckles under the authority and just goes with it.
It would have been fun, I think, to sit around. Of course, we mentioned at the top of this episode that Lenny got called the day of the show to come in and do it. So he obviously probably didn't contribute to the script. It had been finalized at that point. But it would have been very interesting to have sat around that table read to think about the various paces that they were going to put Rob through in the midst of things, shaking the phone over his head, unscrewing the earpiece, unscrewing the mouthpiece, putting them on the table. Then he wants to talk into the phone and realizes that he has the parts out. He's got to put the parts back in to make sure.
And there's all these levels too, where he it's like, if we could just try just one more thing, and then they get him to this other level of agreeability. You'll notice the earpiece unscrews, and like, oh man, he's just gonna go for it. So there's all these moments, and we're seeing this great part of Rob, which is that he's a very intelligent guy. He's very talented. He's a good dude. He's funny, but he's also really childlike sometimes, and it makes him very relatable because all along, he's going to follow through with this pace by pace.
It's a perfect situation to let Dick Van Dyke's abilities shine.
Absolutely.
You could have written on the page, unscrew the mouthpiece and do whatever, but somehow Dick just adds so much to the activity that he's doing. The angle
Absolutely.
of his neck, the
Yeah.
look on his face, eventually, Franklin says, you did this with the mouthpiece, do this, put the pieces on the table. Now turn the base over and find the grill, right? And he said there might be a little dust on your loud soft, so blow on it. So he gets him to blow on it, and Rob says, why would this make it work? And Franklin says, well, if we knew that, we could save the telephone company millions of dollars. Just keep blowing. And what does Rob do? He keeps blowing.
So I one time heard Jerry Seinfeld say that he loved Jerry Lewis because when he watches The Nutty Professor, there's a moment where Jerry Lewis just sits down into a chair, and it's one of the funniest moments in the movie. And he goes, "How could he make just sitting in a chair funny?" And I thought that's the same thing here. You tell him, okay, lay all the pieces on the script just says Rob lays out the phone and its pieces on the table. That's all it says. Or Rob blows on the phone. He somehow can take this small thing. The way he lays it out and just sort of like stares blankly, and you can't even write that. It's just in him,
Yes.
And every single moment like that, he makes 10 times funnier, and it's just so rich, so rich.
It would be interesting to see if we ever had a chance to talk to Dick to ask, do you recall coming up with a bit, rehearsing this? How much time did you spend alone?
Yeah.
Figuring out how you were going to play with these different pieces of the phone.
The way that he can improvise and probably come up with these bits, and the way that it's the rhythm of it is perfect, like it's a perfect rhythm. It's a perfect song, going on. It's unbelievable.
Laura returns to find Rob blowing
Always
on
the
the
female
phone.
voice of reason.
Franklin says, now screw the mouthpiece back together. I think I can't remember exactly where this happens, but oh yeah, comes right up next, right? Murdoch feigns that now he can't hear Rob on the other end, which causes Rob to start shouting into the phone. And Laura says, what are you doing? And Rob says, honey, you don't understand mechanical stuff.
Understand mechanicals, which is classic, like overconfident Rob. Like, just I got it. You don't worry about me. Of course, he doesn't have it at all. Like it's she's always the little voice of reason, and she's not loud about it. She doesn't come in like, you're such an idiot. She just comes like, why are you taking the phone? Okay, she sort of like has moments where she's skeptical, but and she knows it's probably not going to end well, but knows there's no point in trying to convince him because he's just going to go through with it. So, and this sets up her getting her to go onto the phone to see if they can hear her. Because the phone, Phil's saying he can't hear him. That sets it up so Laura is on the phone in the kitchen so she can hear the last part of the phone call when it gets revealed that Rob's being pranked, which I think is pretty crucial.
It also affords the opportunity for Rob to continue to shout into the phone and sort of damage her eardrums because he's so loud. And he's shouting so loud that Rob says, I think I must have broken something. Then he, under his breath, says, I think it's my spleen. Right?
Well, and I love it how serious he's taking this now, which they knew was going to happen too. He's 10 minutes into this call and he's just like screaming and like, we got to get this fixed. It's like this major thing.
Yeah. To your point, as we started this discussion, this call goes on for a very long time, and but it's not boring at all. The viewer is sucked in.
You could watch that phone call all day, I think.
Yeah.
Like I could watch 10 of these, like so funny, so many beats that it hit. I mean, just unbelievable the way it escalates.
Yes, and like you said, we cut back to the party scene, and everybody's engaged there, listening to try to hear what's going on. And Weinrib, Franklin is looking at them, sort of laughing along and getting them going. Quite great writing, but also quite great execution, I think.
Absolutely. So then we get to the final act of the prank call, which is so they can't hear him. He says, we can't hear you. And he says, well, we'll do this one more thing to try to fix it. And so he starts listing these things that Rob needs to go assemble, sort of gather some items around the house, facial tissues, nylon stocking. And as he's revealing this list, I think we get maybe the best moment in the entire episode, which is when Rob and Phil both at the same time come to the realization that Rob's been pranked. And Rob knows he was pranked, and Phil knows Rob knows he was pranked.
Right.
So it's like you get this great moment of, and they both have a look, and it's a little different for each character, but Phil's is sort of just this wry smile, like gotcha, and Rob's is like kind of a deadpan, like, oh god, I can't believe I fell for this, and it is just like one of the greatest moments, no dialogue, just them sharing this look not even looking at each other, but sharing it, at the same time.
Yeah.
So
I
funny.
do think the pacing of Weinrib as Murdoch, as Franklin, or however you want to think of it, for the final line that just catches us all, right? Go out on your lawn, swing it over your head, and scream like a chicken. The pace is so great. It sets
So
it up. And then the best follow-up to that, are you going to do it? I thought a jerk like you would do anything. And that just
so great.
galls Rob to no end, that not only did he get caught in the practical joke, but now he's been considered a jerk because he got so sucked in to the whole premise.
So one of the best lines says, "Who is this?" And he says, "It's me, it's Buddy."
Yeah.
He says, "Buddy, I'm gonna kill you." Perfectly delivered.
Uh-huh.
And I think this is an interesting dynamic between Buddy and Rob, because Rob's very book smart, and he's been to college, all these things. Buddy isn't. And so a lot of times you have that dynamic where, it's kind of a play on the idea that, like, well, yeah, you can be book smart, but you can still be gullible as heck. And if you're good at comedy and pranks, and you might be the king, in this case, book smarts only get you so far kind of thing. So there's always that funny thing of, like, here's the smartest man in this cast of characters, and he's the one being duped, which I think is great.
And I like, Buddy says, "Okay, Rob, we'll see you tomorrow." And Rob says, "No, you won't." "What do you mean? You're not going to work?" He said, "No, Buddy, you're fired." And Maury, again, this is great because, like you said, Rob was the sucker in this situation, right? Maury, Buddy says, it's a sore loser's way of responding. Like, that's how you're going to retaliate. You're going to fire me.
I always wonder, like, why isn't he at the party? He says, "Is everybody there?" He goes, "Yeah, all of us." And I'm just thinking, like, why didn't he get invited? I guess they had to watch that TV show. I guess they were so into.
Yeah, exactly. Why weren't Rob and Laura initially at the party? Because we wouldn't have had an episode if they were, I guess, right?
Exactly. So then we have Rob, hangs up, gets off the phone. He's fuming mad. And then Laura again comes in with her sort of, she's such a great presence in these, because she's sort of in the background, like, "I told you so," kind of thing. And she comes in and she kind of smirking. He says, what are you smirking at? She says, "I just got a picture of you standing on the lawn screaming like a chicken," which I think is great. And then they talk about whether he was a jerk or not. And she concludes, "Yes, Rob, you were a jerk." Now, I will say the term jerk has changed meaning over time.
Yeah.
Now it kind of means like malice, or like you're mean. But back then it just meant like you were kind of dim-witted, I feel like.
Yeah, fool. Yeah.
Yeah, fool. Yeah.
Suddenly Rob says, you can kind of see in his head a little bit of swirling around. Is there some way that perhaps I could get even with Buddy? Or, and Laura says, maybe you're talking about getting some revenge. And well, we'll see, right? Again, which begins to provide a little bit of foreshadowing of where the whole direction of our episode might end up.
Definitely. And she even mentioned something about the evils of practical jokes. Like, you all these times you've been talking about the evils of practical jokes, you still want to get even. And I will say, like, as a person, I'm just a little personal. No, I'm not into practical jokes. Like, I feel like I don't like humiliation humor usually. People that are, the jokes at their expense and everyone's laughing at them, not with them. But for some reason, this episode is one of my favorites, because I think, okay, yes, this is a practical joke, but this is done between all these close friends who know each other very well. And nothing's going to hurt them. Nothing bad is going to happen.
Yep.
So you have that kind of feeling where it's like, this is all in fun. It's getting them, but it's all in fun. So I think that makes it more, easy to enjoy it for me.
We moved to the next day. Rob's arrived at the office. He's sort of in the office sitting at the desk. Buddy and Sally arrive, and Rob says, "Oh, good morning, rats," or something like that, right? And initially Sally takes exception to that comment, but then admits that she also was falling on the floor laughing from what happened to Rob. So,
were you laughing? I was on the floor.
Rob says to Buddy, he'd love to hear the tape. And Buddy says, as soon as they get it back from the cast and crew, since they're all listening to it, Rob's like, "Oh, that's great."
Yeah, he's irritated here, but he's good natured. He's like, "All right, you got me," kind of thing. But then he says the key word, which I think, the key phrase, which is "someday, Buddy, someday," and that's the first instance of Buddy's paranoia, I think, where he goes, Rob is really smart. Is he a better practical joker than me? Do I have to worry? I'm a little worried.
Yeah.
It's already starting,
Is he going to get me?
Yeah.
Which, again, feeds the next series of events that transpire.
Which starts with sort of, I would call a series of like red herrings, like things that are happening to Buddy that he believes Rob is pranking him, but each time it turns out it's not at all,
Rob tells Buddy that Pickles called, but he is, again, like you said, suspicious that it wasn't really Pickles that called. So he, with some trepidation, picks up the phone and makes a phone call, only to discover that it is Pickles, and he quickly hangs up on her. Rob's like,
and he has a good laugh there too. He goes,
yeah,
okay, I'll call her.
And Rob's like, well, why did you hang up? And it was your wife. He goes, yeah, I know. That's why I hung up. Right. I'll call her later.
So then he thinks like, okay, he wasn't lying there. All right, well, and Rob's very wishy-washy about if, like, are you going to do anything? I probably wouldn't do anything at all. I don't know. Well, if I did, it wouldn't hurt you. He's very wishy-washy. So now Buddy's like, oh, on pins and needles again, like, well, wait a minute, and he says, let's be fair, Rob. If I know something's coming, I'll be worried. If I don't, I'll go nuts. And Rob goes, oh, and it just sets up the whole next bit.
And after the phone call with Pickles, Sally's over on the couch knitting, and she says to Buddy, that wasn't a gag. And Buddy says, well, no, that wasn't, but it doesn't mean that I'm still not going to be careful here, because I think Rob's going to get me.
He's planning something, yeah.
The next segment is a little something too, I think, where viewers can take a close look. Again, we have this phone call. The next thing is Buddy goes over to sit down in one of the office chairs, and Rob says, Buddy, don't sit down. And he goes, oh, yeah, what are you gonna get me? Right? He says, no, you're going to sit on the coffee, right? And Buddy's like, yeah, sure. So what does he do? Sits down on the tray of coffee in Danish. And Sally screams just as he sits down, Buddy. Right? The viewer should go back again and look. One of the scenes, the intercuts to Sally talking, you actually see her pick up the coffee tray, the cardboard tray with the coffee in Danish, and move it from the coffee table to the chair, almost as if when she came in, she should have put it on the chair in the first place and put it on the table. And then thinking ahead, all of a sudden realized, oh wow, the bit isn't going to work because the coffee's not on the chair. And you just sort of see her nonchalantly pick it up and move it over there.
Probably so smoothly, we don't even notice, probably,
For no reason, right? And of course, the first time you view it, a viewer probably wouldn't recognize it, but because we've watched these over and over and over again.
David and I have seen these 10,000 times.
We begin to look at those little details and discover it. So take a look at that and see what you think. Buddy ends up sitting on the coffee and
the prune Danish.
And the prune Danish. He said, your prune Danish isn't going to think very much of that either.
So then we go to a new scene. So we've had these couple of incidents now. Buddy thinks he's being pranked. He's not. So now he's like, I don't know what to think. Then we go to back home to Rob and Laura, and they're listening to the tape of the prank phone call from the night before. And I noticed kind of a little ADR kind of thing on there where the way that they're playing the part where Phil at the end says, are you going to do it? Of course not. Well, I thought a jerk like you to do anything. That whole line is different. Like when he says it at the beginning, it's sort of like this loud, like, I thought a jerk like you do anything. And then this one, it actually kind of goes down. I thought a jerk like you do anything. It's totally, and it's a lot softer. And I find that interesting that they somehow, I don't know why they couldn't play the audio from the original. It's kind of interesting how they had to do that.
Yeah, noticed as well. But Laura says to Rob with some nicety, well, at least Buddy was nice enough to give you the tape, to which Rob says, a copy of the tape. Not the tape, but a copy of the tape.
And you start wondering, like, how many copies are there? Is Buddy circulating this to the whole? So then they have the do nothing conversation between Rob and Laura, which is basically Rob says Buddy has, been in a panic all day and he didn't do anything.
Right.
And Laura says, nothing? And he goes, well, I sat and smiled a lot, And she says, that's not nothing. So he's basically talking out loud that the best way to teach Buddy a lesson is to do just that, to not do anything, but keep telling him he's not going to do anything. And Buddy won't believe him. It'll drive him crazy, which we already see. It's already happening. It happened that day in the office already.
Yep.
So it's almost like Rob is a little bit smarter here. You get the sense he maybe understands psychology a little bit better than Buddy, and he's got a little bit better ideas in that regard. So we're wondering, like, is he going to get him, with the psychology kind of stuff?
So Rob decides, I'm going to call Buddy and tell him that. Laura's like, you can't call him now. It's too late. He goes, it's not a better time than to call him than now.
I think I'll call him now and tell him I'll do nothing.
Yeah. So Laura says, I think there is a bit of a monster in you, in the sort of, I'm trying to think of the monsters.
Yeah, like the Dracula kind of.
Yeah, after all, my dear.
Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
Kind of like, Dracula voice, which he does a couple times in the show. And I think just a reminder that, like, Dick Van Dyke probably has so many little goofy talents in his chamber that we don't even know about, but they just sort of come on here. He's got the magic tricks. It gets so fun. It's like, how many voices can that guy do? Probably a bunch,
We return to the office for what would appear to be the big setup the big practical joke. And Buddy now is almost beside himself because he's sure something is going to happen, even though Rob says nothing is going to happen.
He's gotten a call in the middle of the night that something's not going to happen. So now he's convinced,
Why would you call in the middle of the night if something wasn't going to really be done? Again, another great piece of writing. Rob, as a gesture of peacemaker, brings in some Mrs. Jelly's donuts for the writing staff.
The look between, this is another moment, the moment where Lenny or where Phil and Rob realize he's been pranked is one of the greatest looks. The second greatest look in the episode is when Rob plops the box of donuts onto the table and Buddy and Sally look at each other like, oh, that's cute. Like he has to know we know this is a joke. This just great looks between the two of them always.
Of course, Buddy is very apprehensive, won't open the box because he figures there's some spring-loaded something that, if he opens the box, he's really going to get it. Finally, Rob says, okay, well, I'll open the box. So Rob opens the box and Sally looks in and says, yep, there's jelly donuts, just like Rob said. And Buddy says, oh, yeah, they're probably full of Chinese mustard, not jelly.
So many great, hilarious food references in the show. Liver and onions, liver and bananas, Chinese mustard. Just great. To
prove Buddy wrong, Rob picks up one of the donuts and demonstrates they're fine. And Buddy's like, yeah, you think you're going to get me? I know the other two are what have the poison in them.
He's just completely devolving here, right? He's got so much paranoia.
So Rob says, Hal, have a donut. So Sally takes a second donut, takes it. Jelly donut, really good, no issue. This makes Buddy even more skeptical. Oh, sure, it's the last one that you're going to get me with. So what does he do? Rob eats the third one to prove they're all legitimate, and it says to Buddy, "Now am I your friend?" And Buddy says, "Well, what kind of friend are you? You bring 3 jelly donuts and eat them all yourself."
Such a good zing at the end there. Oh, so funny. I remember hearing someplace, and maybe you can remind me if you know what this is. It might have been the DVD commentary by Carl, where he says that if Dick was given something to eat in a scene, he always ate it fully, every take, every scene, no matter what. And even if the things were like been out for a while. So I think there's a scene where he eats scrambled eggs, and he says those eggs had been out for hours. And they were freezing cold. And he goes, and he never complained one time. And he ate it fully every time. And I was thinking, like, that is so cool. Great thing.
Great story. I had not heard that.
So Rob says, someday, Buddy, I hope somebody catches you and good, but it's not going to be me. And I think that's great foreshadowing because of the conclusion of the episode, that in fact is exactly what happens.
It's at this point, Mel appears in the office asking Rob to join him in a meeting with Alan. And Rob, says to Mel, does Sally and Buddy need to join? And this is a great Mel line, right? He says, well, we don't need Sally this time. Him, we never need.
And then Buddy goes, he's right. He's very preoccupied with his paranoia.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a zing back to Mel. We know, it's really bad then. He didn't dish it back, he's gone.
Even Mel says, well, what's going on? And like you said, Rob says, oh, he's preoccupied. And Mel says, keep him that way.
And so we're getting this great dynamic of like Buddy's able to dish it out, right? But like when it comes back on him, he's a scaredy cat, and essentially a lot of his like the ghost of a chance or the one where he loses his job. He's very hasty and overconfident, and he gets in these things, then realizes like, whoa, hang on, this is a bad idea, And I just kind of. And so here's the same thing. He's gone overconfident. He's done this prank on his friend. And now there's a consequence, which is that he's sort of like devolving into fear, and he doesn't, he's kind of losing his grip a little bit, which I think is so fun.
Rob is about to exit and says to Sally, would you try to convince Mr. Fear here that he has nothing to fear but fear himself? All in all, Buddy is firmly convinced that Rob now is really, really going to get him at some point.
Rob leaves with Mel, to go to Alan's office, and the phone rings. And this is the third sort of moment for Buddy when he believes he's being pranked. So he says Marge is on the phone and says that there's a gentleman from the IRS here to see him. And Buddy immediately thinks Rob's at play. And
William Handelbuck, the name of the IRS agent, makes him even more sure that this is up the prank.
And he says, well, Rob's out of the room. He got out of the room to avoid suspicion. That's a clue. And then the name.
But Sally hedges a little and says, I don't know, Buddy. Even with such a hokey name, maybe this is legit.
Female voice of reason again. Yeah, her and Laura are always in there like, I don't know about that. And here we go again with overconfident. Oh no, it's got to be a prank. William Handelbuck. Everything. He's very confident. We know like it's going to come back to bite him. He's too sure of this,
And says to Sally, watch how I handle him. So the door opens and Handlebuck enters, and Buddy proceeds to call him any number of names, right? Mr. Handlebar, Buck Rogers. And as he does it, he sort of looks at Sally as if to say, "Oh, I'm getting him pretty good, right? They're not gonna get me."
He walks in the door. He's immediately making fun of his name. We know from those jokes, like, this is gonna be a doozy. He's already at it. He's already insulting the guy. Like we already know, like, this could be great.
So Handlebuck proceeds to sit down at the desk and opens his briefcase to discuss Buddy's tax return with him. Buddy, believing this entire setup is a joke, pours his guts out and immediately admits that he was sure it was just a matter of time before he was going to get caught by the IRS. And he sent in a pack of lies, false expenses, unreported income. And
of course, Handlebuck's confused. Like, what are you talking about? That's not why I'm here. And he kind of doesn't, get a word in edgewise because Buddy's kind of confessing to all these things that, probably aren't true.
At that point, Rob re-enters, only to have Buddy say to Rob, nice try, but Mr. Handlebar, Buck Rogers or whatever.
I think it's notable here to know that as the audience now, we're confused. Rob's smart. Is he like, we're not sure, is he completely naive or totally diabolical? We have no idea. And it's so fun.
Sally sort of looks at Rob and Rob sort of gives Sally the look like, this not me. But Buddy keeps right on going to the point where Handlebuck says, you're in big trouble here. Takes his business card and rips it up, then takes his tax form and rips it up. And Rob is like, no, Buddy, this is a legit thing,
And Buddy and Sally and Rob share that great head shake where Rob goes, I didn't, I swear, and he's sort of nodding. Yeah. And as the audience, I think, our cue like, oh, okay, he's not in on it, and it has to be, Sally has to be kind of that voice for us where she sees whatever they're exchanging is the real thing,
And Handlebuck, leaves, letting him know on the way out that he's in a load of trouble. Rob tries everything that he can to convince Buddy that Handlebuck was legitimate, and Buddy doesn't believe it until Rob says, you want me to sign? I don't have to sign. Wait, he said, we have your signature. And he grabs the tax return with Buddy's signature on it. And, Buddy says, well, how did he get that? That's government property. And Rob's like, because he's from the government. Interestingly, again, in a version of the script, Buddy says, William Handlebuck. Why couldn't his name have been Morris Moneybags or something more obvious that would have indicated that it was
like, that's the problem.
Yeah, like he misjudged the name.
I didn't notice that in the script. That's funny. So at this point of the episode, there's 4 minutes left in the show. I was unbelievable when I was watching. There's 4 minutes, barely 4 minutes left, and a lot happens in those 4 minutes, and it is like one piece of fantastic writing. So it opens up in the office where it's Buddy, Sally, and Rob again, and they're waiting for William Handlebuck to return, and they're talking about how like they had phoned him and told him it was a situation, and he's coming and sort of like make amends, kind of they're gonna fix it, and Buddy is pacing around. He's really regretful, like, oh God, I can't believe I did this. And now there's like the pivotal point in the scene where Rob says, do you finally trust me, Buddy, that I'm not going to do anything? Do you finally trust me? And he says, oh yeah. He has surrendered all his thoughts about it, and he just believes Rob 100% now. So now that moment of certainty he has sets it up really good for the end.
It does. And Handlebuck returns, and Rob says, let me do the talking. And Rob explains again that what transpired was all a huge misunderstanding. Buddy is very contrite.
Yeah, he's a good boy.
Yeah.
She's petting him.
Yes. Yeah, Sally sort of pets him. Buddy says he's willing to do anything to make it right. Handlebuck says that to make it right, Buddy should tape the form together and copy the information onto a new form, and then pauses ever so subtly before he says, and then put both forms in the paper bag, wave it over your head, and scream like a chicken. We hear again the line that Phil Franklin uttered at the start of our episode.
The audience absolutely erupts in laughter. I will go on record saying this is just my opinion, but that's my boy. One of the biggest laughs in television history, biggest of the show. I think this comes in the top 5 for sure as maybe one of the biggest laughs I've seen on a sitcom. It is just roaring with laughter. And the actors are roaring with laughter, probably because the audience is roaring. It's just one of the biggest laughs you'll ever see. And it would have been really something to be in that audience or, on that stage with all that laughter coming out. It was just really, really cool.
Alvy Moore delivered it brilliantly, yes, right? And raised his voice and screamed like a chicken.
Definitely.
And you're right. Everybody sort of erupts except Buddy, who's totally ticked off and has this fuming look on his face and is looking at Rob, and Rob, you got me. At which point, Phil Franklin comes sauntering
Strolling
in
in.
through the office door with this huge grin on his face.
Very smug, very, very satisfied. Yes.
So thrilled that he was able to pull off the prank.
And he gives Handlebuck the A-OK sign over his head, like, good job, and then he kind of stands behind Buddy till he notices him, and Buddy turns around and he's like, oh, it was you, and he realizes it was him. And
yeah, that he helped Rob get him. And that's where Phil says, oh, no, I got you myself for myself. And actually, then Phil says to Handlebuck, Alvy Moore, nice job, Charlie.
Oh, interesting. I didn't catch
the character's name is Charlie, and it's sort of covered up in some of the audience reaction and some of the other dialogue. But go back and you'll hear him say,
funny. I have not heard that.
Yeah, nice job, Charlie.
Cool. Well, and so then here we go in the end. Phil's the mastermind. And we were told that in the beginning. He's the greatest practical joker in the business. And in the end, he definitely was.
Yep.
And you get that great payoff. And he just says, like, yeah, that's how I got you, buddy. He's like, I knew you'd be worried about Rob, and you'd be so paranoid that you wouldn't even see it coming, and that's exactly what happened. And we get that, like, that's what makes this guy the best.
Yeah.
He like was a prank within a prank, and that's amazing.
Yeah, he figured out how to do it. Buddy is still so incensed about the whole thing that he says to Sally, I want you to type up a statement saying that I, Buddy Sorrell, I'm going to get even with Phil Franklin. To your point, he never would have caught me if I wasn't so worried about catching you. Sally finishes typing the statement, hands it over to Buddy for a signature. Phil graciously offers a pen, which Buddy says, oh, no, believing that it's a trick pen. Instead, he takes one from Rob's pocket of his suit coat, and as he attempts to sign, the pen doesn't write, so he gives a little shake, and as he shakes it, babloom, the pen squirts ink all over his face and some of his shirt.
I would love to know the mechanics behind that little gag, like Glenn Ross, the prop master. Like, how'd you guys do that?
Yes.
Just, all these little things I had to put together.
Rob is just as surprised as Buddy is, looks at Franklin, and Phil says, I put that pen in your coat.
You put it there? Then they do that great handshake, like, got it, Well, it's cool because Rob gets to get Buddy back, but in the way that he's kind of more comfortable with, which is he's not going to be the guy to get the revenge and do his own practical joke. He's just not in his nature, So here he gets to get revenge on Buddy in the best way possible, which I think is so great. So wonderful, wonderful episode.
And it was great to, talk with Lenny or exchange emails with Lenny about this. As I said, some of the thoughts that Lenny remarked about, he said, the lasting success of this Dick Van Dyke Show is due to many stars crossing and joining in a magical convergence in the firmament.
Beautiful.
That sounds religious and a bit biblical. So be it. God truly blessed all those who were part of that wonderful experience. He goes on to say, the great talents both behind and in front of the camera and the love that was always there for all to see carried it to eternal success. The warmth and giving nature of those stars and creative geniuses gave everyone the freedom to do excellent work in an atmosphere of kindness and acceptance that was unrivaled in my career, says Weinrib.
Oh my gosh, that's so moving.
We've heard so many about the tone that was set there on that set by Carl Reiner and Dick and all the rest of the cast to involve everybody to make it the best that it can be. And Lenny goes on to say, I loved working on that series. It was the happiest set I was ever on. Everyone was like family. There were no egos or problems. All of the cast were generous, sweet people, and deserving of all that success. Dick always spent time during breaks practicing something. Piano, pantomime, card tricks. Mm-hmm. He was always trying to improve himself. Mm-hmm. He says, I was mightily impressed. As we discussed earlier, Lenny passed in 2006 from a stroke. He had retired in 93 and moved to Santiago, Chile, where he was living with his second wife, Sonia. And he had two children there, Grace and Heidi. Following our initial contact, Lenny and I exchanged emails frequently. Many times he'd send me a joke or two. Sometimes Sam Denoff was also included in the email distribution. So clearly he had kept in touch with Sam through the years. And he would sign his emails, all the best from Lenny and the Goyles, like the girls, but he would spell it Goils. So we really did become good friends over time. I would send him the Walnut Times newsletter, and he always responded with thanks and appreciation. He even called me one time from Chile about an issue that I had done about the Billy Barnes review. Unfortunately, I missed the call, but he left a very nice voicemail for me. Here it is.
Hello, this is Lenny Weinrib. Is David Van Deusen there? I just want to tell you, I think this is one of the greatest issues of all time. I can't believe the playbill, how young we all were. And I think it's just full of wonderful, wonderful pictures and wonderful photos. And it keeps everybody together in a strange way. We're all still family. And thank you. God bless and take care. Bye-bye.
You could see from his voicemail that he clearly loved the publication. So because he enjoyed it so much, I asked and he agreed to do a fun audio promo for me about the newsletter, which he had to do on a cassette tape down in Chile and then send to me in the United States. So here's that promo.
Hi, all you fans of the Dick Van Dyke Show. This is Lenny Weinrib. Do you remember me as Danny Brewster in the Sam Pomeranz scandals? How about as Jackie Brewster when I tried and succeeded in getting Buddy his job back by really insulting Mel? Or my favorite episode is Phil Franklin when I played those great practical jokes on Rob and Buddy? Yeah, well, listen, for all the scoop about the show, its cast, and its guest stars, I suggest you subscribe to the Walnut Times, a really fun newsletter about the show. And when you get your first issue in the mail, do me a favor, okay? Take the issue and put it in a brown paper bag, go out on your lawn, swing it over your head, and scream like a chicken! Are you going to do it? I thought a nut like you would do anything. After all, walnuts... We're all nuts. Get it? Oh, boy.
That's so cool. That's awesome.
Lenny really was quite a guy. I know through our exchange that he had struggled with diabetes, and he told me that it was challenging to get good medical care down there in Chile. Unfortunately, he ultimately succumbed to a stroke in June of 2006, which one might assume was perhaps in some way related to the diabetes, that wasn't managed very well. So I also want to note, Lenny had a daughter from his first marriage, Linda Weinrib. Linda is a working actress today, following in her father's footsteps, both as an actress and as a voiceover artist. Very proud of her dad's work and really feels as though he continues to live with her in her soul as she, pursues her career.
It's beautiful. Just from hearing what Lenny was saying and then hearing you talk about Linda, they seem very spiritual and kind of connected people. It's very cool. You wouldn't know it from the characters, Lenny's playing,
right.
You did. That's very neat. It's very cool. This was, I think, one of the more brilliantly written and performed episodes of the series. And you got Persky and Denoff, who never miss one, in my opinion, and got all these standout performances. You got Buddy, Maury Amsterdam, and of course Lenny and Alvy, both pretty much standout performances. Rob's genius with the phone call stuff. And again, you're watching comedians using comedy in their real lives, and that's really fun. And I just think it deserves, it's always usually in the top 10 list, and I think it definitely deserves that spot.
One of my favorites, as I said at the outset of this. We hope it's also one of your favorites and that you've enjoyed our look back today at the Impractical Joke.
And if you're looking for that place to really delve into the nitty gritty of your favorite sitcom, the Dick Van Dyke Show, you found your home because we're your people. So come on in.
Remember, we're a community, so we do value your comments, your questions, your contributions to our discussion surrounding the show and the different episodes. So feel free to leave some feedback on the channel or send an email to trippingovertheottoman@gmail.com. And feel free to put in the subject line box 7030. We all know what that means.
Make sure you subscribe to our channel so you can get updated with new episodes, and click the bell icon. And then also you can find us on all the major podcast platforms now, so you can enjoy us in a lot of different places.
So for today, I'm David.
I'm Abby, and thanks for tripping over the Ottoman with us. We'll see you next time.